let's actually talk about China,
Yes.
right? And what role China, I keep seeing the narrative China's on the fence. It doesn't seem to me like China's on the fence.
Well, on the
here.
fence, let's be clear, they want Russia to win. And they want Russia to establish the precedent that a strong nation can have an irredentist agenda, fancy Italian word for taking back territory that has similar attributes to the motherland and reclaiming a mystical empire. So they're saying, look, world, there's Russians in Ukraine, it was part of Russia, it needs to go back. And that's why they did it. So look at Taiwan, it needs to go back, and why have all the violence when we could just do it peacefully and you wouldn't have to go through this? That's their narrative. Privately, they're thinking, as the Communist Party always does, what is in it for us in the most amoral, profitable terms? And wow, Russia's now the largest producer of oil in the world. We need a lot of oil, and they have nowhere to sell it. And they need, as I said earlier, they need access to markets and a domestic consumptive class. So we'll, if the price of oil is $110, we'll buy some for $90. And we'll charge them all sorts of surtaxes to bring out, to be able to have access for their exports via China. And that's what they're interested in. And let's hope, and then they think, you know, if they lose and they're humiliated, we can deplore the violence that transpired. But if they win, we can say, see what happens when you deny a mother country their lawful rights to readopt their progeny. And that's what they're doing. It's incumbent upon us in the West to make Vladimir Putin not achieve his objectives, but as I said, not at the expense of the Ukrainian people. It's their country. So if Zelensky tomorrow wakes up under pressure from people and say, we're being slaughtered, a quarter of us have nowhere to eat, we have no shelter, it's still a very cold spring, then we don't say, oh, no, 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 Zelensky, you're fighting for the world. You said you were fighting for the world. So that's Putin's. That's one of the major players. That's what he's thinking, and we'll see how it works out.
We live in an era of censorship and disinformation, and it can be really hard to know what's true and what's false in this information climate. To get honest information and insights you can trust, join us on Epoch TV. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at ept.ms/free trial Jan. That's ept.ms/free trial JAN. I want to jump back to Zelensky because he's, of course, being lionized in the press and so forth. And at the same time, you know, he seems to be leading a country in a very difficult situation. Before we go there, just one last thing on China. What is China going to do next in this sort of situation? I mean, they're just going to play it out.
Yeah, I think they're going to play it out. They're going to sit tight. They're going to buy a lot of Russian oil. They're going to try to violate the sanctions or the embargo or the boycott. They're going to buy in exchange a lot of Russian wheat and natural resources. They're going to sell Russia a lot of stuff. They're going to have a full-fledged, enhanced commercial relationship. They'll probably have an increased military relationship. And they're going to sit there and see who wins. And they hope Russia wins. But if Russia falters and leaves with a tail between their legs, and the sanctions demonstrate that if you challenge the Western financial system, you pay an enormous price, and then they look at their assets vis-a-vis the Russians and say, well, we're the second biggest economy, of course. We have all these advantages that Russia has, but we don't have 7,000 nukes. We might have 200 or 300 of them, and the United States and the West is scrambling to enhance missile defense. So they're just say, now is not the time to press it. And so that's what they're looking at. They don't know who's going to win yet.
Well, and you know, one of the commentaries I've seen from Indian pundits, for example, is, you know, there's this whole situation on the border of Kashmir, which we don't talk about often. I think there's something like 200,000 Chinese troops deployed there. And, you know, where the West hasn't been like terribly supportive to our sort of this Chinese encroachment on India. Maybe it's Russia that we need to be, you know, friendlier towards, you know. What do you make of this?
It's traditional that, and this is kind of hackneyed thing to say, but Henry Kissinger established, and conservatives got very angry about him. He established this principle that you wanted China to be no friendlier to Russia than to us, and Russia to be no friendlier to China than to us, or vis-a-vis, China had to hate Russia just as much as it hated us, and Russia had to hate China just as much as, and in that triangulation, each party could check the powers of others. And because we had our sphere of influence in Europe and North America and South America, really we were the advantageous party, and we wanted to play them off against each other. But with Russian collusion and this demonization of Russia, we lost that card. And so we had no major power other than India to play off against China. And India just thought, privately, they thought, well, we agree with you, but you didn't really show much in Syria or Libya or Iraq or Afghanistan. And you lecture everybody, you're lecturing our conservative government about all of these utopian bromides, and we get weapons from Russia, so we're just going to kind of stay out of it. They're more concerned, put it this way, about China. If we had spirited, muscular leadership in the United States, if we had a deterrent military force, if we were not woke, if we were spending money in the Pentagon on viable, practical weapons rather than $200 million airplanes, and we have these huge social costs, if we were doing all the right things, then right now as we're speaking, India and Russia and the United States would have a loose understanding of spheres of influence. It doesn't mean you can go into Ukraine, but we would understand that our common enemy, the world's common enemy, is China. But that's been destroyed by Russian collusion and everything else that's transpired the last 5 years.
And given, I think you probably agree, or you can tell me or not, that China is the real paramount strategic threat to the U.S.,
Yeah, I mean, when people say China is the real threat and not Russia, I always think to myself, maybe it's because I was a classicist about grammar and syntax or logic. Okay, let's quantify that. So here's the Belt and Road, where China has the major harbors of Europe, whether it's Naples or the Piraeus or going into Rotterdam, where they build the infrastructures and they have their ships going in and out. They control the Panama Canal. What does Russia have as a counterpart? Nothing. Here's the Chinese population of 1.4 billion. Here's 140 million. Here's the second largest economy with the highest rate of growth. Here's a morbid economy. And you can keep going that way, and it all turns out that China, in terms of power and leverage and influence, it's like a magnitude of 10 to 1 with Russia. And so, yeah, we have to find a way to check Chinese power. And it used to be that the Russians were just as suspicious of the Chinese as they were of us. They still are. They have a border with China, we don't. But we've lost that ability. And part of it's, I don't want to blame us entirely, part of it's Vladimir Putin. Because all of his aims in Ukraine could have been negotiated. I think if he'd sat down, we would have probably said NATO's not going to be incorporating Ukraine into its alliance. There'd be no purpose to it. And we would probably say, we understand that you have spheres of influence among 90% or 80% Russian-speaking people on your border, and we don't want to provoke you. But that's ancient history now.